The Moretti mansion pulsed with danger that night, champagne, diamonds and whispers of blood money. Alina Morales didn't belong there. She was just the event planner, hiding behind her clipboard, trying to stay invisible among the city's most powerful criminals. But when the lights dimmed and the music swelled, she slipped out of the ballroom, her nerves frayed. The marble hallway was silent, the air colder, like she had crossed into another world. Then she saw him. Lorenzo Moretti. The don of the Italian underworld. Broad-shouldered, sharp-suited, a presence that made everyone else shrink. He stood at the end of the hall, surrounded by guards who fell silent when his gaze lifted. Their eyes met. Just for a second. That second felt like a lifetime. He tilted his head slightly, curiosity in the darkness. "Who is she?" His voice was low, dangerous. One of his men stammered, "An event planner, sir." She was just leaving. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. His stare never left Alina's face. She tried to speak, to explain, but her throat went dry. And then the words that changed everything fell from his lips, calm but lethal. "Bring her to my room." The guards hesitated, uncertain. He didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. Alina's breath caught as two men stepped toward her. "Wait. I didn't do anything." Her protest echoed down the hall, swallowed by fear. Lorenzo turned away, disappearing into the shadows of the grand staircase, leaving the order hanging heavy in the air. As she was led upstairs, her heart pounded against her ribs. She didn't know why he wanted her. She didn't know if she'd walk out again. All she knew was that the Don's eyes had seen something in her, something he wasn't willing to ignore. And for a man like Lorenzo Moretti, that made her either very lucky or very doomed. The heavy door shut behind her with a metallic click. Alina stood frozen in the middle of the Don's private suite, the kind of room that whispered power and danger. Black marble, dim lights, the faint scent of smoke and whiskey. Her hands trembled, but she lifted her chin anyway. She refused to look afraid. The door opened again. He entered. Lorenzo Moretti. The man everyone feared, yet he moved with the quiet control of someone who never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. His cold eyes studied her, slowly, like he was reading a file he already knew the ending to. "Name?" he demanded. "Alina Morales," she managed. "Event planner." "I was just." "You were in a restricted hall," he interrupted. "Where my enemies tend to wander." "I got lost," she said, her voice shaking despite herself. "That's all." Lorenzo stepped closer. Each footstep echoed in her chest. He stopped just inches away. "Lost?" His tone was almost mocking. "You expect me to believe that?" "I don't care what you believe," she snapped, fear melting into defiance. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Surprise. Maybe even respect. "Careful," he murmured, leaning closer. "People who speak to me like that rarely finish their sentences." Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. But she didn't back down. "Then maybe you should stop trapping innocent people in your room." Silence. Then a faint, dark smile. He turned away, poured himself a drink and spoke over his shoulder. "Until I find out who sent you here, you're not leaving." Her breath hitched. "You can't do that." "I can do anything I want," he said quietly. "And right now, I want to know why a girl who doesn't belong in my world can't seem to stop looking at me like she does." His words left her speechless. He didn't look at her again, just waved a hand toward the door. "Lock it." The guards obeyed. And as the key turned, Alina realized she wasn't a guest. She was a suspect, or something far more dangerous. Morning came, but Alina couldn't tell. The curtains were drawn tight, shutting out every trace of daylight. The only sound was the distant hum of voices outside the locked door, guards always there, always waiting. She'd been trapped in the Don's room all night. The first few hours she'd shouted. The next few she'd paced. Now she just sat in silence, staring at the untouched tray of food someone had slid in earlier. Then the door opened. Lorenzo Moretti stepped inside, black suit crisp, expression unreadable. He looked at her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or destroy. "You didn't eat," he said flatly. "I'm not hungry." "You should be." "I said I'm not hungry," she snapped. His gaze sharpened. No one talked to him like that. But instead of anger he smiled, faintly, dangerously. Defiant. "Most people beg in my presence. I'm not most people." He studied her again, this time slower. The fire in her eyes, the way she refused to bow. That same look from last night, the one that made him stop, the one he couldn't get out of his head, it was still there. "Tell me something, Alina," he said, walking closer. "Are you brave, or just stupid?" She stood chin high. Maybe both. For a long second they just stared at each other, silence heavy, charged. Then he turned away, frustration flickering in his eyes. Fine, he muttered. You'll stay here until I confirm you're not working for my enemies. And if you can't prove that? He stopped at the door. Then you'll wish you never walked into my world. The door shut again. Alina sank back against the wall, her pulse racing. He wanted to scare her, maybe break her, but she saw something else in his eyes before he left. Curiosity. Conflict. Something that didn't belong in a man like him. And that terrified her more than his threats ever could. Because Alina knew. The most dangerous thing about Lorenzo Moretti wasn't his power. It was the fact that he felt something he didn't want to feel. 3 days. That's how long Alina had been trapped in the Don's suite. No phone. No sunlight. No freedom. Only the quiet footsteps of guards and the memory of Lorenzo's cold, steady eyes. She hated him. She feared him. But worst of all, she was starting to understand him. That morning the door opened without warning. Lorenzo stepped in, a storm brewing behind his calm face. He was on the phone speaking in Italian, sharp, clipped, furious. When he hung up, he poured himself a drink, ignoring her. Alina finally spoke. You can't keep me here forever. He turned slowly. You're right. I just need you until I find out who you work for. I already told you, no one. He studied her for a moment, then reached into his jacket and threw a photo onto the table. It showed her outside a restaurant, talking to a man she didn't know. What is this? She demanded. Evidence, he said flatly. That man tried to kill me last week. Her stomach dropped. I don't even know him. He stepped closer, voice low. Do you expect me to believe that's a coincidence? I expect you to believe the truth, she said, matching his stare. Something flickered in his eyes, doubt. But before he could speak, his phone rang again. He answered sharply, listening, and then his jaw tightened. When he ended the call he looked different. Colder. Controlled. It seems, he said slowly, you might not be the one I should be watching. Alina blinked. What does that mean? He didn't answer. He poured another drink, eyes distant. It means someone used you whether you knew it or not. And until I find out who, you stay here. I'm not your prisoner, she shot back. His gaze locked on hers. No. You're my responsibility now. The word hung heavy in the air, softer than she expected, more dangerous than any threat. Because responsibility, in the hands of a man like Lorenzo Moretti, could mean protection. Or possession. And Alina wasn't sure which one scared her more. Rain battered the windows that night, wind howling against the mansion walls like it carried the sins of everyone inside. Alina couldn't sleep. Every sound, footsteps, thunder, the distant creak of the floor, made her pulse race. Somewhere below, she knew Lorenzo was awake too. He never seemed to rest. When the door burst open suddenly, she flinched. Lorenzo stumbled in, blood on his sleeve, his usually perfect composure cracked. Stay back, he ordered, though his voice was weaker than usual. What happened? She whispered. Business, he muttered, dropping into a chair, wincing. Alina hesitated, torn between fear and instinct. Then she grabbed a towel from the dresser, crouched beside him, and pressed it against his wound. He stiffened. I said stay back. And I said hold still. For a moment he just stared at her, this woman who dared to touch him without permission, without fear. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes stayed firm. You're bleeding because of me, aren't you? She asked softly. Lorenzo exhaled. You're not the reason men try to kill me. But someone used me, she said. You think that doesn't make me part of this? He looked at her, then really looked, at the exhaustion in her face, the courage in her voice. Something in his chest shifted, slow and unfamiliar. You should hate me, he murmured. Maybe I do, she said, meeting his gaze. But that doesn't mean I'll let you bleed to death. Their eyes locked, silence thick with something neither wanted to name. Then, without thinking, he reached up and caught her wrist. His fingers lingered against her skin. Her breath hitched. The distance between them vanished. His lips brushed hers, slow at first, then desperate, like he'd been fighting it for days. And just as quickly he pulled away. Don't, he said harshly. Don't make me forget who I am. Alina stared at him, heart racing. Maybe that's exactly what you need. He didn't answer. He just left the room, leaving her alone with one truth that terrified her more than captivity. She was falling for the man who had locked her away. The mansion was quiet that morning, the kind of silence that pressed heavy on Alina's chest. She didn't know why, but she had a feeling Lorenzo would come to her room again. And when he did, she wasn't scared. Not exactly. Something in her chest, maybe curiosity, maybe madness, made her wait. The door opened and he stepped inside. His expression was unreadable, but the shadows under his eyes betrayed him. "You've been asking questions," he said flatly, closing the door behind him. Alina lifted an eyebrow. "I think it's fair to know who I'm trapped with." For a long moment he just stared. Then, as if deciding she was worthy, he sat on the edge of the bed and sighed. "I had someone once," he said quietly. "Fiancé. She was everything. But," he shook his head, "betrayed me. Killed. It hardened me, made me." Alina swallowed. I'm sorry." He waved the words off. "You shouldn't be. It's the reason I don't trust anyone, not fully. Not even you, yet." She studied him, realizing something strange. She wasn't looking at the Don everyone feared. She was seeing a man shaped by loss, by pain, by a world that chewed people up and spit them out. "And yet," he continued, voice low and rough, "I can't stop noticing you. The way you defy me, the way you don't flinch when I'm like this." Alina's pulse quickened. "You don't want me to be afraid?" He leaned closer. "Fear is easy. You make me want something harder. Control maybe. Or surrender." Her breath hitched. For the first time she saw cracks in his armor, dangerous, tempting cracks. "And that's exactly why I can't let you go," he admitted. His voice was almost a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a threat. "A promise?" Alina realized then that the Don of the Italian underworld was not just dangerous. He was obsessed. And she was at the center of it. Because in the shadows of power and blood, some secrets weren't meant to be shared. But some truths, the darkest, most forbidden ones, would find their way out, through her. The city never slept. And neither did danger. Alina had grown used to the mansion's shadows, the quiet footsteps, the tension in the air, but tonight felt different. The wind outside carried whispers of betrayal, and the usual hum of guards seemed uneasy. Lorenzo paced the study, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and dangerous. Alina watched from the doorway, heart pounding. Something had changed. He was restless, more so than usual. And then it hit, a message on the secure line. One she wasn't meant to see. "She has been taken." Alina's stomach dropped. She knew without being told who she met. Her throat went dry. Before she could react, Lorenzo's hand gripped her shoulder. Firm. Commanding. Terrifying. "They're going to pay," he said, voice low and lethal. "Stay here. Don't move." Alina opened her mouth to protest, but he silenced her with a look. One that promised destruction. Within minutes he was gone, leaving a storm of fury behind. Hours later, the mansion's walls shook with the arrival of his men. Weapons. Faces hardened by violence. Every man and woman ready to obey the Don's orders without question. Alina stayed in the shadows, clutching her chest. Fear clawed at her, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. The man who had locked her in a room days ago and now would risk the city to get her back. Through the rain-soaked night, Lorenzo moved like a predator, leaving no trace, striking silently at those who dared touch what was his. The streets ran cold under his wrath, whispers of fear spreading faster than the storm. And then, in the chaos, Alina realized something terrifying. The man who had once imprisoned her in a room to protect himself had become her protector, her danger, and her obsession. She had no idea if she would see him again that night. But one thing was certain. In the shadows of the Mafia world, the only thing more dangerous than the enemies outside was the man who called her his. Alina had never felt fear like this before. The mansion echoed with chaos, shouts, gunfire, the metallic scent of blood filling the air. The rival Mafia had struck and they had taken her. She was trapped in a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, bruised and terrified, wondering if this was the night she would die. Then a shadow appeared. Lorenzo. The Don. Calm, lethal, unstoppable. He moved like death itself had taken form. Every step he took made the world shrink around him. Every word he whispered carried a promise of destruction. Alina's heart leapt as he reached her side, his hand gripping hers, not gently, but with the force of a man who would rather burn the city to the ground than let her go. "I told you to stay away," he growled, but his eyes betrayed him. Relief. Fear. Possession. I tried, she whispered, shivering. He pressed a finger to her lips. "No excuses. Not now." Then the fight began. Shots rang out, men fell, and Lorenzo moved with precision, every strike calculated. Alina followed his lead, adrenaline overriding fear. Somehow, together they survived. When the last rival fell, silence returned. Lorenzo turned to her, rain and blood dripping down his face, his eyes dark and raw. "Do you understand now?" he asked, voice shaking slightly. "Understand what?" she murmured. "That you're mine," he said, stepping closer, his hand tracing the bruise along her jawline. "Not because I captured you, not because I wanted to protect you, but because I can't let you go. Not ever." Alina's chest tightened. You shouldn't feel like this." His laugh was low, dangerous, yet tender. "I don't feel. Not usually. But you've made me forget that." For the first time, the Don who had locked her in a room and tested her defiance confessed. The truth, he was obsessed, vulnerable only to her and willing to risk everything for her. And in that moment, standing in the wreckage of violence and blood, Alina realized she had fallen completely. Because the man who had once been her captor was now her salvation. And she didn't care what it cost. The mansion was quiet. Too quiet. Alina's heart raced as she moved through the dimly lit corridors, following whispers and the faint sound of footsteps. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Lorenzo appeared from the shadows, his expression stormy. "They've betrayed us," he growled, voice low and lethal. "Someone from inside. Someone I trusted." Alina's stomach twisted. "Who?" He didn't answer. His hand gripped hers, pulling her close. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is you. I won't let them hurt you, not after everything." She nodded, but fear gnawed at her. "Then let me help. Let me fight with you." Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, the cold dawn softened only by a flicker of admiration. "You risk too much," he muttered. "Then let me," she insisted, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I won't run. I'm yours. All the way." His gaze softened for a heartbeat, then hardened again. "Then you'll see the cost of loyalty." The attack came fast. Men they once called allies turned their guns on the mansion, striking from within. Chaos erupted. Alina stayed at Lorenzo's side, warning him, guiding him, proving herself in ways that surprised even him. And then, a final confrontation. The traitor revealed themselves, thinking they could take him down. But Alina acted. She intercepted a blow meant for Lorenzo, her body taking the hit. Pain flared. Blood ran. But she didn't scream. Lorenzo dropped to his knees beside her, fury igniting like wildfire. "Who did this?" he roared, eyes blazing with vengeance. "Who dared touch what's mine?" With a single, brutal precision he ended the threat. The traitor lay broken, fear and respect in their eyes. Lorenzo turned back to Alina, gently lifting her chin. Blood streaked her face, tears in her eyes. "You risked everything for me," he said, voice raw. "Do you understand? Everything?" "I do," she whispered. He held her close, letting her feel the unspoken promise in his embrace. Loyalty has a price, and she had just paid it. But for a man like Lorenzo Moretti, the reward, her trust, her courage, her heart, was worth every drop of blood spilled. Weeks passed. The war was over. The blood had dried, the traitors were gone, and the city whispered a new legend, that the dawn of the Italian underworld had changed. But no one dared say why. Inside the Moretti mansion, Alina stood in front of the grand mirror, her reflection almost unrecognizable. The bruises had faded, but her eyes, once innocent, wide with fear, now held something else. Strength. Fire. She heard the familiar footsteps behind her before she saw him. Lorenzo. His presence still filled the room like thunder. But tonight, there was no darkness in his expression, only quiet intensity. "You should rest," he said softly. "I'm fine," she replied. "Are you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked closer until his reflection stood beside hers in the mirror. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured. "That night, when you bled for me, I realized something." Alina turned, meeting his gaze. "What did you realize?" "That I can rule the world," he said quietly, "but none of it matters without you in it." Her breath caught. Lorenzo Moretti, the man who once ordered her locked in his room, who had built walls around his heart, was finally bare before her. "Don't say things you'll regret," she whispered. He stepped closer. "I've done many things I regret. But this," his hand brushed her cheek, his touch softer than she thought possible. "This won't be one of them." The space between them disappeared. His lips met hers, not with dominance this time but surrender. The kind that comes when a man who's controlled everything finally lets go. When they broke apart, she smiled faintly. "So what happens now, Don Moretti?" He smirked, tracing her jawline. "Now, you stop calling me Don. And what do I call you instead?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Yours." Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft, cleansing, final. Because the story that began with a command, "Bring her to my room," ended with a vow whispered in the dark. She was never meant to leave his side. And now she never would.